Hello and welcome to Monumental, a series of weekly podcasts that looks at the history behind the people and things that inspired great public monuments. This week's episode is all about a public monument that launched 1,000 euphemisms, Nelson's Column. It's 1805. Napoleon is the Emperor of the French, and he's already begun his impressive collection of other European countries. But unfortunately for him, he hasn't quite managed to get his hands on the most impressive bit in the entire set, the chocolate sprinkles on the cappuccino of Europe, Britain. Napoleon also knows that Britain's army is pretty crap, and if he can just get his army onto the British mainland, he'll control the country faster than my granny can eat one of those massive Toblerones, and that's pretty fast. But getting his army onto the mainland has been a bit of a problem, and the main reason for that is the chap 150 feet on top of the column up there, Admiral Horatio Nelson.
Although he was the leader of the British Navy, Nelson himself was not physically strong. He was short, he'd lost the use of an eye, he'd had an arm amputated previously, and he was constantly seasick. But he more than made up for this by being phenomenally confident and brilliantly unconventional. His tactics broke with naval traditions, flummoxing the enemy, and his bravery and willingness to lead from the front inspired not only the Navy but the entire country. In fact, he was so popular that when he started having an affair with one of the greatest beauties of the age, Emma Hamilton, her husband seemed to be delighted with the news, and all three of them even lived together for a few years.
If you talk to a naval historian, and don't worry, I'm not about to, he'll tell you that it wasn't the Battle of Trafalgar at all, but the Battle of the Nile that was Nelson's greatest victory, where, against the odds, he duffed up the French fleet so badly that they ended up being crippled for years, leaving Britain to rule the waves. So why aren't I standing in Nile rather than Trafalgar Square?
The Battle of Trafalgar was all about context. For years, the British had been petrified of French invasion. The level of fear and hysteria was on a par with the threat of German invasion in the Second World War. Nelson's victory finished the hopes of Napoleon getting across the Channel, and the country could finally breathe a huge sigh of relief. As if this wasn't dramatic enough, Nelson himself, who was more admired and more famous than 10 David Beckhams put together, was killed during the battle. It was almost as if to survive Napoleon's onslaught, Britain had to sacrifice its greatest citizen. Upon hearing the news of Nelson's death, King George III summed up the mood of the nation by bursting into tears and blubbering, "We have lost more than we have gained."
Nelson's victory at Trafalgar saved Britain from annihilation and allowed it to get busy with building an empire. Now, 25 years later, when the money from abusing Africans really started to roll in, they had enough cash to build this amazing public monument to the guy who made it all possible, the Admiral's Admiral, the ablest of all seamen, Lord Horatio Nelson.
Coming up next week on Monumental. An explorer who thought he'd found Africa's greatest secret, only for it to end up costing him his life.